Welcome back to Spitballin Cards. In today's video, we're talking about young prospects going for crazy amounts of money. Jac Caglianone is the one that we're going to talk about as the prime example and kind of dive into how to avoid FOMO, right? FOMO is a big thing, especially with prospects and putting too much money into players at the wrong time. So in this episode, you have me, Scott, we have Ty, we have Jeff, and we have Chris. It's good to see you all. Chris, you were off last week. It's good to have you back, right? You were off, right? Or was it Jeff? It was Jeff.
It was Jeff.
Edit.
Yeah.
Edit.
No. You got to live with it. You got to live with it.
I
missed you guys, but there's some great videos. I enjoyed hearing about the Kershaw.
You guys always, not just me, everybody mixes you two up. Is that outside of our Spitballin? Is that everybody that does that?
I don't think so. I mean, we have people that honestly, when people see us in public, I hate to say this, but we're dressed exactly how we're dressed on camera. Like I've rarely seen without one of these jerseys. So people tend to know who's me and who's Jeff.
Good. Okay. All right.
Well, Jeff is the TV star, and I've got a face for radio.
Jeff is a TV star. Have we talked about that on our channel at all, Jeff?
No, I don't know.
I think you should.
For sure.
Kudos here.
We talked about Bad Batch.
Jeff from the Bad Batch is a voice actor.
Which my kids are watching now, and they're like,
cool.
Can we watch more?
It's good.
But what else are you doing? And what are you doing right now, Jeff?
I play an agent on NCIS Origins, the TV show. So I'm on there occasionally. So yes, please watch that Monday nights on CBS.
He had speaking parts and everything, not just an extra.
Oh yeah,
Jeff gets credited because he deserves to be credited. So.
Oh yeah, and his character is named after one of the greatest '80s movie characters, of all time.
What's the character name?
Dalton.
Nice.
Agent Dalton. Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that being said, Jeff, we'll keep it in your corner. How do we feel about Jac Caglianone Bowman Chrome Superfractor autograph selling for $80,000? How do you feel about that?
It sounds like way too much for me. And it's just a good reminder to me why I've gotten out of the prospecting game. And to me, it really is a game. It's all about when you buy and when you sell. And I just can't imagine paying that much for an unproven player. And just thinking about the opportunity cost, what else you could buy with those funds, which it's pretty substantial amount. So I don't know. I think there are. I think a lot of the people that have come into the hobby recently, they like that aspect of it. They like the chance to get in on somebody early. But how early are you really in on them if you're paying $80,000? Scott, I think you had a couple pretty good comps of well-established players and how their prices were related to this sale. And that's eye-opening.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. You guys could buy 8,000 Topps Chrome Ellie De La Cruz rookies in PSA 9 slabs, instead of one Jac Caglianone super.
Hashtag hoarding.
Those both feel like really bad decisions.
Oh, that's horrible decisions. Horrible decisions.
You buy a whole bunch of mums.
I will say that just a couple comps before Ty. I want to just talk about some comps. So we had a Paul Goldschmidt Bowman Chrome Superfractor sell for $49,000, and we had the Freddie Freeman Superfractor sell for, so we'll say $50K for Goldschmidt to make it easy. Freddie Freeman was $90K, I believe, in the last few months.
In December, yeah.
What's the upside to these guys? That's obviously we saw Ellie. Ellie went for like $350,000. Paul Skeens went for $126,000. Remember, we kind of bashed that sale for like $85,000. Then it went to like $125,000. So we were wrong, but I think the general thought process and behind is correct. What's the upside? Ty, what do you think?
There is no upside. I have yet to see any upside. I don't understand these purchases. I would like to talk to somebody making these buys. Now, we did rip on the Skeens sale when it happened, and then that person went and flipped it for like $50K more, like a few months later, which obviously worked out. But historically, I play probabilities. I play odds, and there's not good odds. It doesn't work out in the short term even. So I don't know what motivates somebody to make these purchases. The only thing I can figure out is they think there's some short-term flip opportunity, hot potato to the next person, or I don't know, maybe some tax write-up. I don't know. Or they just don't have the awareness to understand what literally other all-time greats have sold for, which sometimes in some cases doesn't even sniff those values. What was the bounty for Jason, not for Jason Dominguez, for Jackson Holiday when it came out?
I don't
There
know.
was one for Jackson Holiday. There was one for Drew Jones. Drew Jones was like, it was like a crazy number, 250,000.
It was probably something nuts that one of the breakers.
250,000.
I can look it up.
I think it was 250,000 was the bounty for Drew Jones. And now there's people saying like, oh, he's kind of showing signs of slowing down. Like he might not even ever make it to the bigs. Like he just hasn't impressed. He's young, but he hasn't impressed like people thought he would so far. So in terms of the upside, I don't see a lot of upside. And I've got, there's plenty of data here to suggest that there's not a lot of upside. It's pretty freaky, actually.
Drew Jones was $1 million bounty.
Ty, it's
$1 million?
David Adams.
oh my god.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I feel like
It's almost like you got to look at it as short term.
Yeah. What was wasn't the Tatis superfractor? Wasn't the story that the owner was offered like $4 million for that, and he was like, "Oh no, it's and boy, I tell you, that's probably a $50,000 card right now at most." It just seems crazy. Like there's so many established guys you could buy for that price. It's nuts. Like Scott said, the Freddie Freeman sold for $91,000 coming off a World Series MVP and one of the biggest swings that any of us have ever seen. That we're going to see forever, like that at his absolute height for a first ballot Hall of Famer. This Caglianone hasn't done anything, and what's built into that price? It makes me nervous.
Yeah. Is the buyer hoping that Caglianone comes to camp and starts hitting well, and then he can flip it short term like the Skeens guy did?
So in defense of Caglianone, he is kind of viewed as like the next Ohtani. He's a pitcher and a hitter. I think he's out of Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And so yeah, he's out of Florida. And so because of that, people are banking on the hype factor around him. Yeah, Marcelo Mayer is a good one too. But that one could be worth more soon in regards to like he's going to be debuting in the next little bit. But the Volpe looks like a bad one. That's a Papadasha too. But with Caglianone, I think the thought process is he's going to be a top 10 prospect, pitcher, hitter, hype train. But we saw with other players like Brendan McKay, who was
what's the McKay director auto going for these days?
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like it's worth the risk. And like I know we talk about Paul Goldschmidt, but $50K for someone who's viewed as a Hall of Famer towards the end of his career, like what else could Caglianone do more than a top 1% player in the history of baseball to have value? It's tough.
And you're talking about the Mayor as well, maybe having value because he has yet to debut.
Yes.
That's another one. Timing wise, you got to get out, right? Historically, it's shown you got to get out when he's announced that he's going to make his debut, and prices only go down from there.
Yeah, unless he comes out and hits like 5 home runs in his first 9 games, you're cooked. Otherwise, it's just going down no matter what.
Go back to that Jason Dominguez real quick.
Okay.
This is one of the craziest sales in the history of baseball cards. That sounds like a bold statement. What I just said, I will say it again. This is one of the craziest sales in the history of baseball cards. This card, if Jason Dominguez plays how he's been playing, this is like a $10,000 card, $20,000 card. And then in a few years, it could be a $2,000 card.
Yeah, or less.
$500,000.
Yeah, that's
crazy.
Now, to be fair, he had a pretty big home run in spring training in BP today. So, maybe it
did that last year too.
Yeah. Well, who knows?
Hardest part for Dominguez is he was playing really great when he first came up, and then he tore his UCL or something and had time. So injuries, man, they're brutal.
Yep.
So how do we approach prospects? My I think it was my mom. Someone asked me, she's like, why don't you buy like the Rockies players before they make the big leagues? It seems like a really great idea. And like, actually, it's terrible. You wouldn't believe it, but those players go for way more before they play baseball. So how do we approach players we like without spending the bank on hyped prospects? Any advice there from you guys?
Jeff, you should talk about Churio, because this has been hard for you specifically.
Yeah, well, I'll say I got burned a little bit with Keston Hiura because I loved him as a player, loved him as a person, and he was a huge prospect, #1 draft pick for the Brewers, and he came up and had a great early introduction to the bigs. Yeah. So his prices were going pretty crazy, and I bought a lot of his Bowman Chrome autos, a lot of color. I had a lot of it, and I still do. But that was a huge lesson for me. And so with Churio, even though he was a really well-regarded prospect, I didn't buy any of his cards. I happened to pull a Bowman first auto out of the one box I opened, which was awesome. Yeah. So I had that, but I didn't have any prospect cards. And I didn't have any cards until I bought his Chrome SSP this year. And still, I feel like so my strategy, I guess what I'm trying to say is I try to wait till they're at least a little bit established. But by the second half of the season, it looked like he was on a good trajectory. And so now I feel like I could dip my toes in a little bit. And it's going to cost me a lot more than it would have had I bought in earlier. But at the same time, I feel like at least there's a little bit of a safety net there. Not a great one, so I'm not going all in on him, but that's where I am.
It's hard. It's hard to not go all in on guys you like. There's times like where, it's just smart investing if we want to talk about investing, but splitting your money in different players versus having all your eggs in one basket. Chris, what are you thinking?
It's really tough. I was kind of fortunate that I wasn't collecting when Acuna came up because I probably be living out of my car. But Michael Harris has been really difficult for me to kind of like just stand back and just the prices were just absolutely nuts. I think they're still probably a little bit too high for what he's done. And also, I don't want to ruin him. I don't want to buy one of his cards and then have his knees explode. So I have one card of his. I bought a Stadium Club auto because it's like, I think it's the best image, best rookie image he has. So like him and Acuna celebrating in the outfield. It's an awesome card. I bought it because I love it. But otherwise, I'm just kind of waiting. And if he blows up and I feel like I missed out, I still get to enjoy watching him blow up on the field, which is almost more enjoyable than owning his cards. But yeah, watching, we were at the card show, the West Coast card show, and there was a lot of really good Churios. And poor Jeff was just sweating on these cases, like wanting to go all in, but knowing it's probably not the best time to consider it. And I can see like his heart and his brain like battling over these cards. It's tough.
It is
one
tough.
challenge. There's a lot of great Cheerios because there's a lot of great Cheerios printed this year. So you got to be very selective as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. There was one case in particular where a guy had, I want to say 4 different Cheerios Sapphire, like Topps Chrome Sapphire Cheerio images just lined up next to each other. And it took us a minute to figure out there's like Sapphire Auto, Sapphire Update Auto. And we're like, that's a lot. That's a lot of Cheerios and like, just in Sapphire alone. So I think that in a way sort of helps Jeff kind of back up a little bit because there's just too many cards.
It does.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Wait for that Dynasty, Jeff.
Oh man. Dynasty or Red Ink. I'm looking forward to those.
Those would be great cards.
Yeah.
We're waiting. No, we are legitimately waiting. And if Mad City Brew or any of the Brewers fans, I will not buy this. I will just push it towards Jeff. But we need the dual Curio Robin Yount auto with the 75 design with Yount, like his rookie image on one side and Churio on the other side. We need that card.
They got to make it happen.
Got to make that card happen.
Hey, talk to your buddy Mike. Maybe he can make it happen for you. They can call it every single set will have a blabbing about slabbing section on the checklist where you guys pick one card for each set that you like.
And that will be the end of the Fanatic stock price.
All right. Anything else you want to add on this, Ty?
I think when you're prospecting, like for players you like on your team, one thing that can work well is you can make money in prospecting. A lot of people do it because of that hype cycle. And when you get in, when they get the call up, they spike. I mean, and it has to be players of note. It has to be highly touted players, not just like some random schmo who's not being watched who happens to get a call up, but like the top prospects, when they get called up, there's a very demonstrable pattern historically of their data, of their prices spiking. Sometimes it's pretty short-lived. So if you want to collect their cards and you want to prospect on them a little bit, just buying multiples of what they have can work out really well to where ideally you get a card for a significantly discounted price at the end of that hype cycle or at the beginning of it, you might say. So I bought like 3 Jackson Jobe PSA 10 Sapphire Bowman, prospect firsts. And then I sold 2 of them last year when he got called up. And so now the one that I have, and I have a different one, a yellow that I got really discounted or at a good price too. But like that made the one that I still have much cheaper because I made profit on the other 2 that I sold. So I think that's what you want to do is kind of look for those low points and where the prices have sort of bottomed out in the off season, or, if they're just struggling a little bit when they first get into the minors, something along those lines, you get a discount, have the patience to hold them. And then once they get that call up or, that first day, just get them listed on eBay and don't try to, get your like top dollar for it, because a lot of times a lot of that will hit the market. It's just like a bunch of people are selling and a bunch of people are buying. I like to just get it out there for a price that's below whatever anybody else has been paying, or look for an auction that just ended and throw it up there for $5 less or something like that. And you can help fund then your own PC of like prospects. It's a pretty reliable way to do it.
When did you buy the Joe though? Because like you got to time the buy. You can't buy it like when the product comes out, right? You got to wait a little bit and hope there's a gap between the product release and the player's debut.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a lull last year. It was probably in like the first third of the season, and people weren't really paying as much attention to them. I think it was probably in May of last year, maybe June, that I bought them. I don't remember exactly now, and they weren't like cheap, but they did spike up last year when I was able to make some profit. And it didn't completely pay for the third copy, but it helped. You know, you can time those things pretty reliably. Hira, the interesting thing, I wanted to actually pull up Keston Hira, because looking at his stats, this is like a really cautionary tale, right?
Yeah.
So here's his stats, 2019, and he played 84 games, hits 19 homers. So basically almost a 40 home run pace season for a half a season that he played.
It was incredible.
And, yeah, 303 average, 938 OPS. Like, he had a very, very good season. And then to go from 303 to 212, and obviously the strikeouts were there. You know, he was striking out a lot, but just that can happen. That's sort of the freaky thing about baseball. And even if you look at his baseball savant, like there's a lot of good red in here, but then all of a sudden you just start switching, like even to the next season, 2020, and it's like, whoa, you know, everything just starts to change. So you can have all the data in the world at your fingertips, and some of these guys just fall apart. They just regress. And that's kind of the maddening thing about baseball. It
was especially surprising with him because the power was a little good surprise in 2019, but he came out of college. He led the country in hitting. He batted well over 400 and was just a hitting machine, an absolute hitting machine. And I thought the power would take a while to develop. So that's why when he first came up, and he still was only 22 and kept his average over 300, was hitting bombs. Yeah, the strikeouts were there, but he was still hitting well, and it just fell off.
Reminds me of this guy.
Yeah.
He had a couple good seasons, and then the Tigers paid him a bunch of money, and all of a sudden, oops.
Wow. Baseball's tough. Sometimes nagging injuries, sometimes sophomore slumps. It's not every day you have someone like a Freddie Freeman who can play it forever. That's not normal. So I would just be cautionary around that. I'm glad you brought that up, though, Ty. There's absolutely money you can make doing this, but at your own risk, and depending on what risk appetite is. There are cycles you can analyze and look at, and sometimes not buying the top cards is the right way to go, right? Buying a lot of like the mid to lower ends at good prices and then selling them for 30-40% more in a few months, and when they're approaching, you know, the AAA and people are getting hyped up on them, or the new Baseball America prospect list comes out. It's one of those things where there's a lot of ways to skin a cat on that one.
Yeah, there's it's very different from a sport like, maybe take, for example, basketball, where it's rare that you see a player in basketball. It's a lot more rare that you see a player in basketball who's highly touted, who breaks out early and then just completely falls apart. Like Ben Simmons is probably an example. There are some, you know, who like they get the yips or whatever, and they lose motivation. Or I'm talking about independent of like injury risk and other like off the court or off the field trouble, but just it's a lot more predictable in that sense. But baseball is, I mean, it's wild. It's wild. So I think even when you have data, even when you have all this advanced data on Baseball Savant in particular, it can look all red one year and then some blue and some red the next year. And then it can go back to all red or down to blue, and you just don't know. You literally have no idea. I mean, there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time researching what's going on with these players and their training in the off season and their weight and all that stuff. And I mean, if you go to that level of detail, maybe it helps. I don't know, but it's not easy.
Baseball is different than basketball too. Typically, yeah, you can get the yips in basketball and miss shots, but baseball, you can lose your swing, or you can make one very tiny mechanical error in the offseason, and all of a sudden your swing's ruined that year. Then you can bounce back. It's one of those sports where it's the most difficult to reproduce on a yearly basis. Jeff, you sent a video of whose pitch was it? You sent me a video on Instagram of a crazy pitch. Was it Paul Skeens facing one of his teammates?
Yeah, pitching to Adam Frazier, and you can't, from that point of view, you see how quickly the ball gets on you. It's crazy.
But it's one of those things where pitching just keeps advancing in regards to velocity and nasty stuff and number of pitchers you're facing every single game. It's a tough sport to be good at. And so don't always bank on somebody. That's the hard part. That's why I always like a little bit more advanced players too. Maybe I don't have that as much upside, but there's still upside in regards to those players. So
yeah.
Tyrese Halliburton, Tyrese Halliburton. I see a lot of
yeah.
makeup on him. Is he a similar comp to basketball?
I don't know what's going on with Halliburton.
Yeah.
That is the weirdest thing on earth. Jeff and I text sometimes about that. It's one of the weirdest regressions I've ever seen.
Yeah,
One of the weirdest meteoric rises and then regressions.
Exactly. He was on a trajectory to be like a all NBA type player.
Yeah.
And
insane.
just fell
And then
apart.
this year he's just been terrible, right? Or the last 2
It's
years?
just been like mediocre.
And the last thing I think we should talk about before we wrap up this episode is FOMO, fear of missing out. I think we've all dealt with it. I think we all actively deal with it as we speak. How do you guys avoid FOMO? What do you do?
That's a nice assumption, Scott, to assume that we all
Avoid. What is that?
Yeah, I'm not. No, it is tough. It is a powerful force. It's similar to like, we see this in fantasy baseball too. There's like deep sleepers. There's guys who are like breakout candidates, but if you draft them in the 3rd or 4th round, then you're really not getting any value out of that. There's an assumption you're making that they're going to be good. And it just makes it's hard. I think that's kind of at the base of FOMO. We see there were so many like Ohtani cards for sale at this show Jeff and I were just at, and so many Caglianone cards for sale. And that's people were just talking about them and they want to, there's like a buzz and they just want to be a part of it. You know, people want to hold those cards and say, I knew this guy was going to be good. There's like that perceived, when you have someone on your fantasy team who blows up, at least I know Jeff and I have some people in our leagues who will brag incessantly from 8th place that they were right about this one guy they drafted in the 6th round. But I think it's very similar to that.
Yeah, and it is hard to avoid, especially when you are on Instagram, card Instagram, or at these shows, like Chris said, and see what other people have. It is really a test of discipline to try to pull yourself away from that, and it's one that I certainly don't always win. I don't always pass that test. But I think part of it too is trying to at least take a step back and look at the bigger picture, like we've talked about with players that aren't necessarily established, or players that are established, like Chris was saying, like Freddie Freeman is the very peak of his value, and is now the best time to buy more Freddie Freeman cards because he's so popular and you want to have a card of his, or is it better to wait a little bit until that hype cycle falls onto someone else? And the latter is probably the case, but it's tough. I don't know. What do you think, Ty?
FOMO is really tough. My wife and I are about to have a little girl anytime in the next 2 weweeks, and I'm pushing for the middle name to be FOMO. Like it is.
I hope your wife wins that argument, Ty.
Yeah, she's not going for it, but you know me, who knows? I've got a stack here. I mean, this is all like probably FOMO stuff that would qualify as FOMO, stuff that I'm gonna sell. I've got things I'm gonna sell the Cards HQ. I FOMO'd this Chris sale last year. There's just lots of FOMO that happens.
Hey, didn't I sell you that?
Not probably. Yeah.
That's the
Yeah, I
extract.
FOMO'd it. Yeah, I was like, oh, look, I'll buy something from Scott. I'll help Scott FOMO buy your Chris sale, Scott.
Can't believe you did that, Scott.
Yeah.
It was priced fairly, like $500. Just kidding.
Yeah. Scott had like a whole story around this card. You know, he sold me on. The FOMO's tough. I mean, there's some ways you can avoid it. And some of them more extreme than others, maybe. I've been less active on Instagram for like 6 months now. That has helped me with FOMO big time. I'm not saying you should bail on Instagram. There's things I miss about it. I'm wading back into the waters of Instagram a little bit. Having my computer logged in again. So that's helped. One thing you could do if you have like a real problem with it, you could delete the eBay app from your phone and just use it on your computer. If you have a computer, you could do that. If it's like, oh, I just keep getting myself into trouble. I'm not saying I would recommend that. The mobile app's way better, but if you go to a card show, just come in and be like, I've got the cash I've got, and that's it. And I'm not Venmoing or I'm not PayPaling or whatever, I've got the cash that I got, but it's really difficult. One thing that can help a lot is if you have specific if you're the type of person that has like a specific target list, writing that list down of cards that you're after and what each of them costs, and then make your own little ranking, and then sort of stick to that. And if you see a card, you might go, oh, this card's sweet. Oh, and it's a good deal. It's like, maybe 15% less than what it should be. It's a good deal, but this is card 197 on my list. So I'm not going to buy it because it's too far down on the list. There's an infinite sea of cards, and there's an infinite sea of Instagram, and there's an infinite sea of eBay, like for what you could actually scroll through and find. So I don't know, discipline's difficult. And then maybe the last thing I would say is every once in a while, just allow yourself to give into FOMO. If you see something that you didn't know you wanted, that's cool. Like actually indulging in a little bit, I think can help sort of keep it at bay too. Like just once, once a month, I let myself cave to some FOMO and I push the bin button or whatever, or I add a show or whatever it might be. But yeah, I mean, going through what you have, if you've been in the hobby long enough and finding like stacks on stacks of stuff that you're like, it didn't make the wall, it didn't make the shelves. Like I got it. What am I going to do with this? They could just help you pump the brakes in the future on other things that you might not like as much. Like you said, Chris, before, I was like, hey, do you want this Freddie gold minted? And you're like, nah, I'm trying to temper my Dodgers purchases of Freddie. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly, you got to have those guardrails.
There's always going to be cards you want to buy. There are going to be more cards you want than money you have to spend, no matter how rich you are.
No matter who you are.
Unless you're the 1%, but you know what I'm saying. For all of our listeners, most likely. And so just delete eBay, log out for a week. I'm looking at my eBay right now. There's some cards I have on my watch list I wasn't planning on buying, but it's like that Kershaw Hope Diamond from 2011 Topps is still pretty low. Oh, that Juan Soto Gold Refractor out of 5 from Heritage is pretty low. And all of a sudden you buy these cards, and then a card you really care about.
Let me go look up that Soto right now.
Yeah, Jeff's already
2021, he's in a Nationals uniform. But like, it's one of those things where there's always going to be more cards. It's okay to miss. There's a card I didn't buy today I kind of wanted, and it sucks, but it's okay. Unless it's a one-on-one and you really got to make a decision in that moment, it's okay to wait, is my advice.
Yeah. I would also just say that like what you see on Instagram or like the baseball cards subreddit, it's like less than 1% of what's really out there and what's really going on. Like on Facebook too, you see people like, oh, I got my hobby jumbos and like first pack, and here's like a real one auto of like Paul Skeens or something. That is not usually what happens, but it gets you so fired up. Like, I don't want to be left out of this new product that's out.
Yeah.
But walking around a show and talking to people, everyone just gets absolutely annihilated on these boxes. And they don't bother posting about it because no one wants to brag. They just threw away $1,500 on a jumbo case. But if someone buys like one blaster and gets a big hit, you're going to see about it. But just remember that that's not the thing that happens all the time. That's like the one person who beat the craps table, while 80 other people walked away with no money.
It's a great place to end. Thanks for watching, everybody. Baseball's a life of crap tables. All right. See ya.